internet just like that. It's magical.
Remarkable.
Remarkable, right? The power of technology. So how you doing?
Good. I'm still amazed by it all. I'm hypnotized by technology. I still get amazed that I can watch videos on my phone, and
right,
a fax machine still gives me awe.
I mean, you think about what they showed us in like Star Trek and Star Wars, right? And we're better now than what they had then, right?
Right.
The grainy black and white thing in Star Wars that you could kind of barely make out. I carry a phone in my pocket that can do a video call better than what I used to see in movies.
I remember back in the 80s when fax machines first came out. I don't want to embarrass my brother, but he actually thought he was sending me something to review, and he put it in the fax machine. Of course, it sent it digitally to me, but it came out the other side, so he thought it wasn't working. So he kept feeding it back to the fax machine, and I got 6 or 8 copies. Apparently, he thought, the machine crumples it up really small, and it
shoots it off.
Pushed through the wire, and then I smooth it out on my end to read it.
Right.
But he's gotten a little bit more advanced, and I'm just behind him now. So
yeah, is he pretty good?
We handled this, which was great.
Right. If we can do this, then you can do just about anything.
Right.
So you are based in DC still, right?
Yes, I have my practice here in DC, but I've been here since the early 90s and have been working in the child safety community industry, for lack of a better way of saying it, for going on 25 years now. And most of the work has been done here in Washington, D.C. And one of my areas of expertise is convincing members of Congress, administrations, as best you can, agencies to pay attention to kids and their safety. And that's what I've been doing most of my professional life, other than a short stint for 6 or 7 years actually practicing law in St. Louis.
I wasn't aware of that. So what area of law did you actually practice?
I did commercial litigation. So I was doing the courtroom stuff, what you see on television, although not quite as dramatic as that. But I prepared cases for litigation, some of which actually got into the courtroom. Many of them don't. So I did that for, 6 years or so, and then moved up here to Washington, D.C., fell in love with a girl, married her, still married, still in love or some form of it, and started my new career 25 years ago in child injury protection, child safety, injury prevention, child safety protection. And that's what I've been doing for now a quarter of a century.
So what is the origin story when you decided to go to law school back in, what year did you graduate law school?
I graduated in 1989. I graduated from Indiana University in 86 and law school in 89.
So this will be your 30-year anniversary next year.
Yeah, coming up.
That's pretty cool.
You are about to get to motivation. My son, I'm just putting my son off into college now. This is his first year of college will be next year. And kids today take it much more seriously than I did. I went to law school quite simply, a little embarrassed to admit it, but it's candid and honest. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Right.
I didn't have any passion, any inspiration. So you're 20-something years old, and what 20-year-old, at least then, know what the hell they want to do. I didn't. And law school seemed like an interesting concept, at least the education component of it. And I'm glad I did. It changed the way I think for the better. And I've been using it every day since my degree.
So when you graduated, did you immediately, what did you do first?
I practiced law at a fairly large firm in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I'm from originally. Mm-hmm. And did commercial litigation there. And at the time was doing, having call it a long distance relationship with my wife, Claudia, at the time, a girlfriend, eventually fiance, now wife. And we did long distance for a while. She was here in Washington, D.C. And after a while, it was either, the proverbial get off the pot, right, or whatever. And for an attorney, the marketplace in Washington, D.C. is much, much greater than it is in St. Louis. So I made the move up here. This is a city filled with interesting, creative ways to utilize your law degree. And I ended up working for Children's Hospital here, the Children's National Medical Center, and worked for a program of theirs called Safe Kids, which I know you've heard of. It's still around and still exists today, and did everything for them in an executive fashion. But two of the things I did was legal work for them. As that organization got bigger and bigger, became Safe Kids Worldwide, legal work became more and more sophisticated. And then also serviced the mission by doing advocacy, which is just a fancy way of saying lobbying, lobbying on behalf of children. And to some extent, or to much extent, I still do both those things today for some of the family foundations that I help in their pursuit of mission.
I'm always a fan of lawyers who find a cool way to be lawyers without actually doing law the traditional way that we normally think of, having a practice, litigation, lawsuits, criminal law, and some of the best people I know are like you, are lawyers who figured out a neat path to the goals they want to do through a law degree, which I always think is really admirable, actually.
I do this about 8 or 10 times a year. Friends or acquaintances, business colleagues have young adults in their life who are going to law school or have just graduated law school and want to know what they can do with their law degree other than, as you say, the traditional practice of law. Well, this is the oasis for that here in Washington, D.C. Although, there in Florida, any city's got options for that, but they're much, much greater and much broader, much deeper here in Washington, D.C. And I speak to young adults all the time about how they can creatively use their law degrees, and in most cases, creatively to use them for good. Although I personally think, attorneys serve an important role in our society. Sometimes it's a little embarrassing, but they do overall. And so if anybody wants to go to law school, there's lots of things you can do with that law degree once you graduate.
Yeah. I have a good friend of mine who does urban planning, urban development, and he went to law school, but all of his work comes around city planning and creating these little city centers, and it's a neat way to be a lawyer without actually being a lawyer.
We all get hypnotized by what we see on television as to what we do, and that's a big part of it, no doubt. But here, like I say, here in Washington D.C., there are so many things you can do. One of which is what I do and what we work on together for a living, and it's been quite rewarding and also a good profession. I've done well doing it.
So how long were you with Safe Kids?
I was with them for 17 years, and ended up. I thought I left. Thought I might take a couple of years off, but once I got out, people started contacting me, or I had known people. And of course, the Taylors, Scott and Katie Taylor from Abbeys Hope, and started talking with them about helping get their foundation not up and running because it had been started, but I just don't think they were pleased with where it was. So they asked me if I could help them. And I signed a year-long, maybe a 2-year contract to help hire, board recruit, mission serve, PR, advocacy, all those things. And boy, I'm going on 6 years with them. So
wow.
Yeah, what I thought would be a couple of years just to take up some of my time has ended up being much, much more to that. And then word spread, and other families have joined the fold, so to speak.
So talk a little bit about Abbeys Hope and what you guys do.
Well, Abbeys Hope is a nonprofit organization based in Edina, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, one of the communities outside Minneapolis. And like so many family foundations, it started through a tragedy. I mean, I've listened to many of your I guess you would call this a video cast. Yeah. And there's a lot of tragic stories out there. And Katie and Scott Taylor, the founders of Abbeys Hope, had a daughter who died in a pool entrapment. Her name was Abby, Abbeys Hope. And it was a public pool, albeit a private country club there in Edina, and she sat down in a wading pool on a drain. And it's a little disturbing, Eric. I know you know the basics of the story, but hopefully people can handle, the business side of this.
I think it's important.
Yeah, she was eviscerated, which is a fancy medical term for having her insides pulled out of her body, out of her rectum, so to speak. And she died as a result of her injuries. It's a very, very serious injury and almost impossible to survive. I mean, when your digestive tract is pulled out of your body from the suction of a drain, it's very difficult to recover from that. She fought bravely, heroically, but she died a few months after. So, in her hospital bed, she, waxed on about why this happened to her and shouldn't pools be safer? And she sure does hope, underline that word hope, that this doesn't happen to any other kids. And Katie and Scott, that kind of registered. And when she passed away, they decided to start the Abbeys Hope Charitable Foundation. And it's been around for, just celebrated its 10th year. And it does exactly what you and probably the viewers think they do. They work to prevent those things from happening to other children and adults for that matter. And it's done through education, public policy, the advocacy work on Capitol Hill and the agencies. We'll probably talk a little bit more specifically about some of those things. The public health perspective, education, presentations around the country, stakeholders, convincing decision makers and leaders about how to prevent children from dying from entrapment and traditional forms of drowning, which are both part of their mission. And I believe, I can be so bold, hope it doesn't sound egotistical, but I think we've made quite a difference.
I was going to say, there's a lot of nonprofits out there and they're all doing fantastic work. You guys have achieved a level of efficacy that is really remarkable. Even on the legislative side, the work you did with the, Preston to Eburn McKenzie law is really something, Yeah.
Well, that's one of the benefits of my experience.
And the Baker law, obviously.
Yeah, the Virginia Graham Baker.
Virginia Graham Baker, yeah.
Which, by the way, three of the children all died from entrapments. It was the perfect storm, not in the good way. In the mid 2000s, died from an entrapment. There was Abby, who we talked about, who was eviscerated at a public pool. There was Graham Baker, who is Nancy Baker's daughter, Secretary of State James Baker's, for those of you who are old enough to remember him. I know you are, Eric. I am too. His granddaughter, Graham Baker. And there was a child in Greenwich, Connecticut, Zach Cohn, who you're familiar with. The Zach Foundation, based in Greenwich, Connecticut. And all of them died within a short period of time each other, which ended up being the motivation for the passage of the law that changed the way pools and spas are built and maintained in this country. And it's still around today and still an active and vibrant piece of legislation.
And if I'm correct, since the passing of the law, since it's been implemented, there have been 0 drainage fatalities in a commercial pool. Is that right?
That's correct. Actually, the probably the best way to say it, since the enforcement date of the law passed, and then it took enforcement 1 year later. We had to let the industry catch up and understand the products that are out there that would bring them in compliance with the law. But you're absolutely right. Your memory is serving you correctly. There's not been a single death in a public pool related to an entrapment since the enforcement date of that law, which tells me that it works.
Yeah.
In fact, I just did an interview with a newspaper just a handful of days ago, and the basic gist of the interview was not necessarily about what the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act requires, and we'll probably talk about that here during our video cast, but instead pointing out that it's an example of government working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Not without its controversy, not without its, we had to give a little, take a little, give a little negotiation, but Democrats, Republicans, the agency itself, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the pool industry, the advocate community, which I represented in much of the lobbying that went on Capitol Hill, did come together, not always in complete agreement, but always professional, always well, and crafted a law that passed both chambers swimmingly, pardon the pun. Very popular piece of legislation, and it's worked. And everybody's embraced it just great. And that your stat about 0 deaths is proof positive that, government can work, despite what we might read in the paper.
Yeah, and a lot of laws get passed, and you hear about them not having kind of the intended outcome, but in this case, really phenomenal. And I think you deserve quite a bit of credit for that, because it's it's a real testament to the Abbeys Hope and in your work and the intelligence in which the law was crafted. So I think kudos to you for that. It was really well done.
It's also a comment on the parents, and 3 of them I mentioned.
Sure.
Their willingness to turn tragedy to triumph. I always describe the families that do advocacy work on behalf of drowning prevention or any mission where children die, leaving kids unattended in cars, or child occupant protection, fire and burn, poisoning. When you lose a child, if you're willing to risk emotional fragility that you have after that to do some greater good, it's a very selfless, not selfish, selfless act. And it was actually Nancy Baker who taught me that lesson. She's a painter, and she lives up in Maine now, and I still do work for her and her family. And she once said to me that she loses herself in painting, and it's 15, 20 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes a day when she's painting, where she's not thinking about her daughter and the tragedy. Well, when you open up a foundation, or when you put yourself out there to be an advocate to make sure that it doesn't happen to other children, you're allowing all of us to intrude on that few minutes of peace that you might have. And by asking public presentations, radio interviews, webcasts like yours, the advocacy efforts, you intrude on that moments of peace and actually have to relive that tragedy over and over again. And I've always been an admirer of those parents who do that. So much of the credit goes to them and their courage to be able to speak up in these situations.
Absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about the law and kind of what it offered and how it's still being used right now.
Well, if you were to pick up the law yourself, Eric, or anybody, even as smart as you are, and I don't mean that as facetiously as a joke.
Well, thanks.
I've worked with you for a long time. If you were to read the law, to me, it reads like Shakespeare. I mean, I never understood a damn word the guy said. Yeah. But when you read the Cliff Notes and then go back to the original work, it kind of makes the piece of legislation, or makes the play come to life. Well, the same thing here. If you were to read the piece of legislation, you wouldn't understand much of what it says. I have difficulty understanding it, even as an attorney. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes, and there's 4 or 5 things that the piece of legislation did, and I'll go through them quickly. The first thing was it made it illegal to sell a dangerous drain in this country, in any store, in any fashion, distribute, sell, retail, commercial, anything. It's illegal. And I actually have, it'll be a little bit difficult on the screen, but
we'll explain it.
You can see a dangerous drain right here. There it is, looking forward facing. There it is by the side. It's flat like this. So if it sits on the bottom of a pool and a kid goes down there, the suction is quite strong. Puts any part of their body, the chest, the back, the buttocks, even the side, a seal can be formed.
Or even hair. I've heard about it.
That's right, hair entanglement.
Yep.
And also if you sit a certain way with your butt on the drain, that's where eviscerations can happen because it's so strong. So the first thing the piece of legislation did was making it illegal to sell these drain covers in the marketplace. And I'll come back, remind me if I don't get to this, there's a beauty to that particular concept that I'll raise again, that affects all pools, not just public pools.
I was going to say, I was actually going to reference that already because I think see where you're going with that, but go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, we can get to it now, but.
Well, no, just that, if it's illegal to sell them, period, that's residential, that's commercial, it has an impact across the full spectrum of pools, not just the public pools, which the law, was kind of targeted at.
Yep, spot on. That's exactly right. The number two, which gets to your point, is that it requires the use of safe drain covers. Now, hopefully you can see this. Here it is front on. It may look the same front on, but on the side, you can see it's rounded. It's dome-shaped. It sits at the bottom of the pool, and because it is dome-shaped and engineered a certain way, you can't get the seal. There's always space for water flow around the drain, and that prevents the suction from happening in the first place. So now, number two, you have to use these safe drains in all public pools across the country. Does not affect residential pools. Mm-hmm. Now, back to your point, which you so smartly pointed out, even because this is illegal to sell, you can't find them in the marketplace anymore. So even when you're building pools, even residential pools, you can't not but buy the safe drain covers in the pool.
And plus, no manufacturer of drain covers wants to be the company that sells the ones that are labeled unsafe, right? I mean, that's
right. In fact, you can't even find them anymore.
Right.
We were just at the National Drowning Prevention Alliance, which you've attended so many of those. Mm-hmm. And I said to one of the pool service company guys, I can't find dangerous drains anymore. Can you send me a box as you pull them out? And I just not but 2-3 weeks ago got a box with 3 or 4 in there, admitting that they're very tough to find. These are almost impossible to find at the bottom. You can still do it, but much rarer now to find these at the bottom of the pool. So illegal to sell anywhere, no matter what the retail outlet, requirement to use in public pools. So that was the second component of the Virginia Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act. The third component was making sure that pools going forward have 2 drains at the bottom instead of just 1. Drains like you see in the back of Holiday Inns, not to be pejorative against that chain, but any small hotel, apartment complex, any kidney-shaped pool, which we've all seen so many times. There must be thousands and thousands of them in Florida where you're sitting. You have to, going forward for new pools, make sure you have 2 drains attached to the same pump. So if you cover one drain, you still have flow going the other way. So that's an issue that Congress addressed to talk about pools going forward. For those that still have single drains at the bottom of the pools, meaning just 1 drain at the bottom, not 2, you have to have backup systems that detect the suction and shut them off. So that was an important concept, not only affecting the marketplace, requiring use of certain type of drains, but making changes to existing pools with single drains and looking forward as to new pools that are being built every single day, and to make sure they're at least dual drain pools.
Is that residential or just commercial?
That is commercial. However, the standard practices now, the best practices, both by code and by education, is that it's been a long. I just don't think they build new pools anymore with a single main drain.
Right.
Maybe be specifically addressed in the federal legislation, but everybody has recognized the laws of physics making a difference, whether it's a public pool or private pool.
Right.
And that if it is a private pool construction companies have made the change and are now doing it properly there. So,
and that's tremendous. I mean, that alone, I'm sure. I mean, we know for a fact it's eliminated all of those deaths that probably would have happened had the law and the changes that came with the law not taking effect. So,
well, you see plenty of pools in Florida now, and I'm sure the people that tune into your webcast, when you go to a hotel, when you go to a friend's house for a pool, you can start, activating your own way to help and take a look at the bottom of pools. Most of them will have the safe drain covers, but if they don't, politely mention to the pool and spa operator, are you familiar with the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act? You just refer to it as the VGB Act.
right.
And if you see one of these that are flat at the bottom of the pool, you know that they haven't kept up with the piece of federal legislation. I had someone say to me once, which is so good: if you can stub your toe on the drain, it's a safe drain cover. If it's smooth and flush to the bottom of the pool, it might very well be a dangerous one. Certainly, Eric, if the drain is missing from the bottom of the pool. Now, a good drain that's missing, not a good drain. It doesn't serve its purpose. So you have to make sure you let the owners and operators know that that is a death trap waiting to happen. Public pool, private pool, apartment, summer camp, hotel, you name it. That's a dangerous situation. In fact, you probably saw the video recently. It happened not in Florida, but in your neck of the woods, in South Carolina. The kid that was entrapped, the drain, he was able to lift the drain, the screws weren't in right, and was stuck to the bottom of the lazy river. And boy, some guy in a miracle survived because a guy gave him breathing CPR underwater for close to 9 minutes. So it can happen, and it's a good thing to do as you think about watching kids and active supervision. I'm sure we'll be talking about those issues also here. That you also just take a look at the bottom of the pool and make sure that things look right there. Not and tell your kids not to go near the drain, safe drain or not.
Right. And I'm sure for hotels who have the unsafe drain, it's a pretty cheap fix to get to the good one, right?
Right. I'm told this is $60.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah. And you do it as part of your service. And all these public pools have got services probably the beginning of the year and probably once a month, if not more, throughout the course of a summer. In Florida, at least every few weeks you're having a service guy out there, and they should be looking for those kind of things and change them out. There's a bit of a service. You do one-time service.
Sure.
You got to pay someone for their work. God bless America. But the actual drain itself, it's not like this is a $1,200 safety event.
No, less than $100, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So what laws would you like to see get better? What legislation, as far as water safety and pool safety goes, I know that there's been a lot of local laws. Florida has a pool safety law, which has just gotten a lot worse in the last year.
Right.
We took a big hit last July where floating pool alarms are now an option.
Right.
An alternative to pool fences or hardwired alarms on all the doors and windows that lead to the pool. So now instead of that, you can get a floating pool alarm, which is, in my opinion, dangerous. In fact, we have a program we call the Save a Life program, where we donate pool fences to any family who experiences a fatal or non-fatal drowning. And we're giving a fence away next week to a family who experienced a non-fatal drowning. And they have a brand new pool, and their pool builder gave them the choices that they're required by law to give, which is, a pool alarm, alarms on the doors and windows, or a pool fence. They thought that all of those were equally safe because there are the three choices. They chose the pool alarm, and their kid almost drowned. He is still in the hospital right now, being treated. And they met code and they complied with the law, but the law failed their child and is currently, fighting for recovery in a hospital.
But there's a difference between what is referred to as passive prevention and active prevention.
Right.
I used to have a mentor who was a pediatric burn surgeon at Children's Hospital, the founder of Safe Kids. His name was Marty Eichelberger, and he used to say, boy, you can put a fence at the top of a cliff or very fast ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. Right. You want the fence at the top of you want to prevent the injury from happening in the first place. Another example is smoke alarms. That happens once the fire has started, and all
right. It's already, the house is on fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, a sprinkler system, sure, there's still a fire or smoke, but it actually actively prevents it from spreading and causing injury. Well, the fence, there may be a role for pool alarms as a backup. There's some question as to whether or not they work properly, but a fence I know works, and preferably an isolation fence. You're in the business and you know what that means. Four-sided fencing all the way around the pool. That's the best way, is to put that barrier. We don't know all the facts yet, but we saw a very high-profile drowning now recently with an Olympic skier, Bodie Miller, and his wife, who I think her last name was Morgan.
Morgan is her first name.
Morgan. And she was I think a volleyball.
Yep, volleyball, yeah.
Yep, and they lost their child tragically, made quite a bit of news. The child, as happens, can scamper away. You lose control. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would presume that there wasn't a barrier from whoever's home they were in. There wasn't an appropriate barrier between the home and the pool to prevent that 18-month-old young girl from getting into the pool. So fencing is very important. And to your original question, when you see pieces of legislation passing around the country that prevent that are serving safety, and they do in many respects, but there is a best practice concept, and I believe, and many do, I know you agree, notwithstanding the fact that you're in the business. I mean, this is a public health common fact that barrier fencing, isolation fencing, works. And there's no better way to prevent a kid from getting unfettered access to a pool, which, by the way, also applies to inflatable pools or above ground pools in backyards, is to put fencing around them. So to see laws passed that require that type of safety device, if we, driving a car is dangerous, or can be. So you have child occupant protection laws, you have adult seatbelt laws. Examples of like that are, we got a polio vaccination. You don't see polio anymore.
Right.
Active prevention. I liken those two examples to pool fences and to safe drains and so forth. You're creating a safe environment. I'll give you one other example. Just by interest, you and I are older than the average bear. And remember when refrigerators used to lock from the inside. There was no magnetics. You pull the handle, that retro-looking refrigerator. Well, a lot of kids were climbing into refrigerators and suffocating in refrigerators because they couldn't get out. Well, there was a piece of legislation, Virginia Graham Baker, to address that issue, and now those are illegal to manufacture because of the deaths associated. Well, you make the environment safer. Now, the kid happens to crawl into an abandoned refrigerator at a junkyard or out in the backyard or a working one, you just push on the inside and you can get out. So that's how we should be thinking about our advocacy as we want to protect kids.
So what would your ideal pool safety law look like? And would it be state? Would it be federal? And what would it contain?
Well, one of the reasons why the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act did not reach into backyards was because Congress felt, and I believe they are right, that constitutionally they couldn't require parents or pools to use the safe drain. For instance, they couldn't pass a law that says every home has to have a smoke alarm in it, or that your child has to use a child occupant protection seat or a bike helmet. Though that's not that's not for the federal government. I won't go into details. From my law school days, there's something for the 10th Amendment called the 10th Amendment that basically says if it's not in the Constitution, it's not for Congress. I mean, it has to be in the Constitution, then Congress can act on it. So they felt they couldn't reach into residential pools. So your comment that is it federal, is it state? Our Constitution probably requires a combined effort whereby Congress can handle public pools, like we talked about, hotels, motels, community pools, so forth. And then the states need to pass laws that affect residential pools. And the perfect piece of legislation is going to address the drain entrapment issue. Even if people are building pools correctly now, there's a lot of old existing pools that still need to be addressed. That does barriers properly. I prefer, and I know you do too, isolation fencing. I like a backup, a pool cover, electronic pool cover, or a manual pool cover work well. And then there's other issues about, training of CPR, not just for responders, but for everybody as part of a health curriculum, lifeguard training. I mean, you can go on and on about what we need to be doing from an advocacy point of view, or at the very least an education point of view, to make sure that the pool, the spa, the pond, the lake, the river is as safe as possible.
No, that sounds perfect. And I think California's got a pretty good one. The law that they recently passed that has 7 options and then requires you to get 2 of them, which fits in with the layers of protection mantra that we use all of the time, and actually takes that concept and puts it into legislation. I think California might have the best pool safety law in the country currently.
Right. California often leads the way on consumer protection. And often, but not always, often it does spread through the country. Now, it's a long process to get that kind of thing. It's tough to get someone from Idaho to think about drowning prevention.
Sure.
Although it do happen there. That's why the education component of what we do, what you do, what our friends and stakeholders do is so important also, not just the advocacy component. In fact, I'd say, much of what I do now is education. And when advocacy comes up, that's when we activate that particular component of what I do. So the education's component too. And to get back to the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, Congress was smart enough to establish in that piece of legislation, a lot of people don't realize it, the Pool Safely campaign.
Yes.
Actually a creature of Congress. And that's an
phenomenal campaign.
Yes, an education campaign that still goes on today, run by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Their funding has been cut a little bit over the years, but it still exists and it's quite effective. There are things I would like to see them be a little bit more active about, but overall, it's a very good program, kind of like the Back to Sleep program and the Stop, Drop, and Roll. All these things take repetitive messages, a concerted effort with the resources behind it to get it done, and the Pool Safely campaign does that.
No, I think the Pool Safely campaign is one of, if not the best, pool safety campaigns that we've seen to date. I mean, their videos are fantastic. The literature they put out is excellent. They did a very, very intelligent, thoughtful job of trying to get out to the public. And even the name is clever. To turn a pool safely into a verb. Just an excellent job on their part. Really, really well done.
And most people don't realize that all of their materials are free.
Yeah.
You go to their website and that includes pool service companies or fencing companies. Or if you service a pool, you leave a little packet, a little door tag, a water watchdog, tag. I've got one here that you can get that all free from the federal government. Lots of other groups, including Abbeys Hope, but and you can have a leave behind, which I think is a great thing for pool service companies to do. As you do your cleaning, your chemical testing, and your maintenance of the pool, you leave behind some consumer education material. I think it demonstrates that you care, not just about getting your invoice paid, nothing wrong with that, but also that you care about your customers as constituents, and you can spread some safety also. And that's very important. All that material is free at the CPSC.
At poolsafely.gov and
right.
probably .com too.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in the water safety community watch this. In fact, probably the majority of the people that watch this are involved in drowning prevention in some ways. And a lot live in states who have laws like ours in Florida. that leave a lot to be desired. So since you've done this before, and it's kind of an area of expertise for you, what would you recommend to people like me and other people trying to affect change on our state and local laws to make them into the laws we'd like them to be?
Actually, the second most popular presentation that I do around the country is kind of an advocacy 101 about how to affect change, as you say. And the first thing I'll say is that the vast majority of people are so scared about advocacy and lobbying. Talking to your member of Congress, a state senator or a United States senator. It's a very intimidating process. Well, let me fix that misconception right now.
Demystify it for us.
Yes, demystify it. There is no reason to be apprehensive about doing it. The people who are listening to this or watching this webcast know way more than any member of Congress or any state legislator or local legislator about the mission that we're talking about here. So that's number one. And in that presentation that I do, I've got about 10 or 12 advocacy tips. We can talk about some of them, but the most important thing, the number one thing that I recommend that everybody do, and it's probably something for you to do in your business, is a concept that I call make a friend instead of find a friend. A lot of people, and I see this all the time on Capitol Hill, you've got a big issue you want changed, you run up on Capitol Hill or your state legislature or your county council, doesn't matter which venue you're talking about here, and you try to find someone who'll support you on your issue. Totally legitimate way of doing it. I think inefficient and not the best, but a legitimate way of doing it. And in fact, most people do it that way. I instead subscribe to a make a friend. And that is make a friend with your state legislature, your congressional leaders, your county council members before you ever have the need or the ask. And let me use your business as an example. Eric, if you haven't invited your county councilman or your state representative, either senator or delegate, I think they're delegates in Florida, to tour your facility there, your manufacturing, to maybe spend an hour with you at a pool. I know you do lots of newsletters and communications. Getting them engaged about what you do as a small businessman in Florida, and make a friend so that when there is a tragedy, and there's going to be one in Florida, and you're ready to move on an advocacy, you can call Senator Jones and you've got that relationship. So that's the number one tip that I give everybody is whether or not you think you've got any advocacy effort pending, if you're too busy to do it, doesn't matter. Engage your local leadership and decision makers, your advocacy decision makers now with a meet and greet at their office, letting them know about your business or about your organization, taking them, like I said, a tour on your facilities, a manufacturing facility or your nonprofit offices. Have a little brown bag lunch with them when they're in town, or if they're already local, invite them over just so they know that you exist out there. And you'll watch how quickly they recognize it as an opportunity for them to look good, because they're motivated by lots of things, one of which is ego and retaining that seat or that position. And if you can help them look good, well, all the better. You'll do some good at the same time. So that's the number one tip I give to people who want to get involved or should get involved in advocacy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably better to have that relationship and never, quote, use it, end quote, than to need it and not have it, right?
And something like drowning, I don't care if it's the District of Columbia, Florida, or Minnesota, there's going to be a need. Because, I mean, you and I both wake up every day to clips on our computers and phones about drownings that have happened around the country, and it seems like it's never ending. So you can utilize, and I don't mean that wholeheartedly, you can use a tragic event in a community in a polite fashion at the right time to activate your friend that you've made prior to the need. So I just love that strategy, and it's worked very well for me. Every once in a while, you do get a member of Congress who already are knee deep. Again, a pun. Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida was involved in the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act from the very beginning, along with many other members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat and independents. But she didn't have to be convinced. She was one of those. You didn't have to find that friend. You knew she existed, and she was ready to help when it comes to pool safety. So, but that's rare. That's kind of rare.
So, what is the most popular presentation you give, if that's number 2?
As an attorney by training, a lot of foundations, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of fire stations, police stations, all want to do, a child safety seat checkup event in their backyard, or a pool safety check, or a personal flotation device loaner station. And the number one reason or roadblock is liability, which is misguided. So I do a presentation both at NDPA and Water Safety Congress. I mean, you name it. Also child occupant protection conferences and other. I just did it for the National Association of Au Pairs, a liability presentation about how to protect yourself and your organization from the small exposure to liability you have to do programming. So the theme of that particular presentation is don't let the fear of liability prevent you from doing God's work. Utilize a little bit of healthy fear to make sure that whatever you do, you do it right. And we walk through an understanding of liability, negligence, and how to keep your exposure very, very small.
So for the parents and moms and dads that tend to tune into this, what does Abbeys Hope recommend for pool safety, for water safety? What are some things that parents should be doing to be keeping their backyard safer?
Well, one of the things that I say regularly, and lots of people say this, is that, drowning doesn't happen the way it happens on a movie, in a movie.
Sure.
Help, I'm drowning, or what is it? Lassie, Timmy, dropped in the well. There's no big commotion. We've all seen videos of kids drowning, live or taped, of an actual incident. The kid goes under. It's a very quiet thing. So the most important thing for the parent to do is active supervision. And you have to keep your eyes on the child at all times when they're at a pool. Now, I'm sure, and I've seen some of your other webcasts, everybody talks about the Water Watcher program and what it does. And the reason why everybody talks about there, because they frickin' work.
Right.
A great way to get people engaged. And, Abbeys Hope's got one that's free on our website. You just sign a little pledge and you'll get a free water watchdog dog. It's made of metal, so it's, very durable and weather resistant, can hang by the pool. But you know how they work. I feel almost silly even talking about it. Most of your viewers do, but it's obvious. You put this on. It's my job to watch the pool at a party, at a swim class, or an afternoon at a community pool, even if there's lifeguards there, by the way. I think. Right. And then after 15 or 20 minutes, I take it off and I put it on around your neck, and now it's your job. And I can go have the hot dog, or in my case, 2 or 3 of them, and read a book or check your phone while the other parent is watching. So it's that uninterrupted, active, consistent, constant supervision of children. That's number one. No day at a pool should end in a tragedy, as we know they often do.
Have you ever been to a pool party yet where you've been a water watcher?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I've also been to pools that I've been to pools and parties where I didn't know very many people. They didn't know what I do for a living, and there were water watchdogs. In one case, it happened to be Abbeys Hope. In another case, it was a pool safely water watchdog tag. and they had a whole system, a sign up in 15 minutes, and they were watching the pool, and there were lifeguards there. So that kind of warmed my heart a little bit. They're not used enough. They really should be used. We apply sunscreen. We make sure that the kids have got their goggles for the chlorine. You need the water watchdog. That's what we call it, water watchdog tag program, as a pool, as an extra, as you say, layer of protection around the pool, just in case something happens. So that's number one. No, number two is, I think I always say that learn to swim. It's not a life skill; it's a life-saving skill.
Right.
We put our kids in tennis lessons and football and bowling and chess and golf and all the other things that happen, hockey and track. And those are great life skills, but none of those are going to save your life, except maybe track if you're being chased by a bear. But swimming is actually a life-saving skill. So getting kids signed up for swim lessons, the American Academy Pediatrics says around 2, but you got to know your own child. Certainly water comfort classes, moving into the actual instructional classes, absolutely should do it. I did it with my kid, and right now he's at a summer camp and is a lifeguard, passed his lifeguarding test, and is a lifeguard at a lake. So it's an important skill to have, learning how to swim.
And what's next?
Absolutely. Yeah, since you already have the
incidents happen.
Sure.
Not a bad idea to get yourself trained at the very least with bystander CPR.
Yes.
It's not the full-fledged CPR. You and I have been in those classes ourselves, and that's a way to save life. We've heard lectures and guest speakers at many of the conferences you and I have been to that say, if you can get CPR started, even bystander CPR, we're not talking, trying to think of a famous doctor, but an experienced EMT, even bystander CPR improves someone's chance of survival tremendously. There's a number there that's shocking. I don't remember what it is, but it is a large number where you improve the percentage of survival after a drowning or other incidences if you know bystander CPR at the very least. So, before the summer starts or during the summer, host a CPR class at your home or sign up at your YMCA. We did one in my neighborhood where everybody contributed. I think each family contributed $25 or $35, and 7-8 families came to my living room, and we all learned CPR right here, and it was fun. Not only it was worth doing, obviously. So
I always think of our friend Laura Metro,
right,
who started the Clay Foundation, which has become CPR Party, and her son, who is fine today, suffered a non-fatal drowning, and she believes that the reason Clay, her son, is okay is because a bystander initiated CPR and performed CPR who did only what he had seen on TV. He didn't even really know CPR, but he did, what he thought to be the best thing. And now her son is alive and fine and happy and doing great. And, so even, she decided that, certification is ideal, but if you could throw CPR parties, maybe kind of like you did, you can give people enough information that they might be able to save someone like her son Clay was saved.
Right. A doctor once told me, and I've heard it a couple of times since, so I can't speak to its absolute accuracy, but I bet it is. He told me, this was an emergency room physician, that there's a 25% chance during the course of your lifetime that during the course of your lifetime, you will be in the room with someone that needs CPR or the Heimlich Maneuver.
Wow.
So now it hasn't happened to me yet.
Right.
It's only a 25% chance. I've not had that happen. Have you?
Not yet. No.
Yeah. So we're in the 25%, but there's a pretty good, 1 in 4 chance
right
throughout the course of your lifetime that's going to happen. So it's nice to have somebody in the room that knows how to respond, at least informally, to those situations. so you can help save a life.
I think it was last year that Dr. Heimlich got to perform the Heimlich Maneuver for the first time.
Yeah.
He was in a nursing home, and the lady next to him started choking, and he did it, and it worked. Didn't
he recently pass away too? I think
he may have. Yeah.
But you're right. I do remember that. That's is that ironic when that happens? That
ironic or a coincidence? But I know the older lady who was the who received the Heimlich from him was honored that the Dr. Heimlich did the Heimlich maneuver on her. She was really excited about that.
Everybody knows what it is, but not too many people know how to do it.
Right.
And it can happen. I mean, odds are with you that you're going to see it. So.
Yeah, and apparently it works really well. If you do it right, it chucks the thing out of your mouth really effectively. So
you could probably watch a couple of YouTube videos as it relates to that to get the basic gist of the Heimlich.
And you're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And even probably maybe not as good, but I bet if you watch some videos on CPR, you would be ahead of the game at least.
Yes, absolutely. If your standard is just getting to know the basics, that might be a good place to start. It's a worthwhile effort.
We did one of these with somebody, and it was live and in person. And a great lady named Jen, she did a CPR demonstration on a dummy for us. So it's in one of our other videos if you go take a look. But she thought at least that if people watching could see her do it, that they might be able to recreate it. So, and she's trained and does it all the time. So, if she thinks that you could learn it from a video, you probably can.
Well, if we can all learn how to plank and dump ice water on ourselves,
right?
We can at least learn a little bit about CPR. We spend enough time in front of our devices. Absolutely,
for sure. So, anything going on with Abbeys Hope that you want people to know about?
Well, we always have, it's getting towards the end of the summer, but Abbeys Hope always spends much of the summer. I'm proud to say practicing what we preach, what we're just talking about. We still distribute to. I think I was told about 6,000 of these in this summer alone.
Wow.
Summer camps and families across the country, and with a little sheet on how to use them, as if it isn't obvious. It's explained right here. But nonetheless, and we hope people who receive those do utilize it. We also underwrite hundreds, if not near 1,000, free swim lessons in the Minnesota area each year. In fact, we just partnered with a swim school in the Midwest to get the Abbeys Hope information at those schools. And I always continue our advocacy work. Each year, we have to make sure that the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Pool Safely campaign, get their funding for both education, grants to communities, and also improving the legislation as we find out we need to make changes throughout time. So that continues. It's a little tough to get members of Congress to pay attention to it now, but it does work. And making sure that the agency itself is properly monetized to do the good work that they do each year. So it's a battle that has incremental successes every year, and we're happy to do it. So,
excellent. Is there anything else you want to plug or make sure people know about before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, it seems like every time I see someone do these interviews, they always do their website. Yeah. So I'll do the same.
Okay.
AbbeysHope.org. Lots of good information on there, including their little icon on there that says "Take the Pledge." It's a little promise to behave a certain way around the pool, and you take that, you click, and then you get one of these tags in the mail free. Do it and stay in touch, keep engaged, and make a friend out there.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Perfect, Alan. Well, thank you really so much. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You are one of my favorite people that I've met through the NDPA. And as soon as I started doing this, I knew immediately that you were somebody I wanted to have on and talk to. So
right back at you. I wouldn't have said yes if I didn't like working with you. So
well, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Alan. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye-bye, sir.
Right. Take care. And I'll turn this off, maybe. Well, yeah. Maybe. There we go. All right, take it easy.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. We'll talk later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.